So Deathdream, 1974, directed by the great Bob Clark. Such a versatile director, everything from Porky's to A Christmas Story to Black Christmas, which is one of the scariest horror movies ever made. A film which really competes in many people's minds with Halloween for being one of their favorite 70s horror films. He made, before all of those, he made this film, Dead of Night, also known as The Night Andy Came Home, released in VHS in the US as Deathdream by Gorgon, and that's how I watched it originally. I rented it on VHS many, many years ago, and it's a film that just sticks with you. It has stuck with me all these years, the moments in the film, and strange moments and scares. It's a scary movie. It's one of the scariest movies that I can think of. It's really an unheralded horror classic, an unrecognized horror classic. It goes beyond just a cult classic and something that has a few neat scenes and some neat special effects and some interesting actors. No, this is a really good movie. It's a really good movie that is really frightening and is really, really interesting film. So it may be one of the first and one of the only Vietnam veteran horror movies. It's about a Vietnam kid in Vietnam, just a young kid, Andy, from a nuclear family, and he goes off to Vietnam, and his family receives a letter that he's died, but then that night of receiving the letter, Andy shows up at their door, in front of their doorstep, somehow alive, but very changed, and with certain very unique needs and requirements that become very deadly for everyone around Andy. So in a way, the film is about Vietnam and kids coming back from Vietnam and the nuclear family trying to rejoin the nuclear family that they left, and finding themselves not being able to reintegrate, coming back changed. In Andy's case, very, very changed. But in real life, this was happening in a realistic sense, with kids coming home and being traumatized by the horrors of war. And so there's an element of that in the film. There's also the monkey's paw element of the be careful what you wish for. Andy's mother, Lynn Carlin, kind of almost conjures him back into life. And so there's that as well. But most like monkey's paw stories, one thing about the monkey's paw stories is that they kind of it's kind of like, they're very short stories usually. The monkey's paw is a very short story, and it's kind of like the end is just kind of like a punchline. Oh, your dead relative or loved one is back, but he's messed up. Oh, and he can't live. Oh, he's screaming in pain, and it just, like that. I don't know if it was a Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt segment, where there was a segment where this guy was brought back to life, but he was embalmed. So he was screaming in pain, and he didn't. And it was like, oh, he's back, but he's embalmed. Oh, and it's just that. Deathdream allowed the whole Vietnam subtext and this idea of the nuclear family allows the scenario to kind of play out and the drama to develop. So it's not just like a punchline. So it's one of the more successful retellings of that kind of monkey's paw, like be careful what you wish for type of story within the context of Vietnam. But the film is really not a Vietnam film. There were a lot of films made during the early 60s or the mid 60s and the early 70s that are kind of very period films, and they're not really rewatchable today because they're all about hippy dippies and the Vietnam and the protesters and this and that, and they're interesting films. The films like The Strawberry Statement and stuff like that, they're interesting films, but I think Strawberry Statement may not have aged as it may have aged much better than some of the other films, but some of them are just kind of like they haven't aged very well, and you can't. If you weren't born in that era, maybe you don't even get all of the in-jokes and the stuff. Dead of Night is not about that. Dead of Night is really first and foremost a horror movie. There's all these subtexts and the undercurrents and all of this stuff and and social commentary and all that stuff going on. But first and foremost, Bob Clark made Dead of Night as like a drive-in horror movie. So I don't even think the word Vietnam is even mentioned. Maybe barely in the film. They mentioned World War II. There's a World War II veteran who goes and sits down with Andy and talks about, hey, there's a lot of people who came home who shouldn't have come home, and Andy just kind of glares at him, and so I think but Vietnam is barely even mentioned. It could be really any war. It's just an idea of this person coming back and trying to, his family trying to rally around him and trying to make him part of the family, but he's off. He's dead. Really. There are so many films of all genres, of comedy, action, romance even, which rely on the big sounds, the booming, and to trying to sensory overload. Dead of Night is one of those movies that just is the total opposite of that. The Dead of Night relies on mood and just whispered sounds and eerie wind and darkness and shadow and suggestion. It is a very, very, very creepy movie. It reminds me in some ways of George Romero's Martin, about just an outsider, someone who can't quite integrate. It was kind of outside in a way, the kind of moody, well done thing. I think in some ways Martin is more well shot than Deathdream, but then I think in some ways Martin is not as successful as Deathdream. It's just not a total. It's in its totality. It's just not a as well written a film and as succinct as Deathdream. It kind of has that George Romero kind of baby fat in it, and then toward the end when they get into that blaxploitation like shoot 'em up sequence, it just kind of takes the air all out of it. And Deathdream has a really great conclusion. It really leads you up and things just come to a head and it just blows apart, The cast in Deathdream is great. I mean, it has a great story written by Alan Ormsby, of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and Bob Clark and Alan Ormsby already worked on that. But Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, it's an okay movie. It's just a kind of creepy, spooky movie. This is a real focused, good effort. But the whole, as I said, the cast of the film is great. You've got John Morley and Lynn Carlin as the mother and the father. They were already playing, a relationship. In John Cassavetes' Faces. You have as their daughter, Andy's sister, Anya Ormsby, the interesting actress from Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, Alan Ormsby's wife, I guess. And she's just perfect in the role, and she's able to conjure these levels of hysteria, of histrionics that really work. The relationship with John Morley and Lynn Carlin is so great. The feel, especially the father, John Morley, his relationship to his son, being incredibly happy that he's come back, but then the disconnection, when he's not the son that left for Vietnam, John Morley was a great actor. he'd done of course, he was part of the Cassavetes crew, and he was in little B movies like The Car and other things, and he was in great movies before that. He's probably always going to be remembered as the guy in The Godfather who had the head in his in his night sheets, who found the horse's head. And in this film, he experiences some pet trauma. He has a horrible incident that he has to experience and has to survive through, and he does survive through it. Man, what a great, and also the first special effects debut of Tom Savini, doing some very simple effects. I mean, there's some eye effects and some decrepit stuff going on. But I think it's Savini taking his experience in Vietnam and infusing it into this work, because Tom Savini was a Vietnam era photographer. He saw a lot of anatomically correct gore and a lot of real stuff, and I can't help but think that kind of also helped play into some of Andy's transformations. And I guess, speaking of cast and crew and everything, at the center of the film there is Richard Backus, who went on to become an interesting television actor and do some other stuff, as Andy, as the young kid who comes home from war, totally changed. We don't really see him as a normal person, except in the opening scenes when he's in the firing line, when he's in combat, and he's almost about to get his ticket home, and but he has this. He's just like this mystery. He shows up as this ghost. Is he a ghost? Is he a vampire? Is he a monster? Is he a Wurdelak? Is he what? Is he a werewolf? Is he a zombie? What quite is he? And that to me at the middle is that mystery at the middle of the film, that from the moment that you see him and he shows up, he has this weird cracked smile. And the moments that Richard Backus is able to infuse into this, where he has this, you could see through his eyes a sense of loss, of pain, of anger. The rocking chair, the constant rocking chair, is almost like a meditation, of just this guy who's just not quite there, being conjured to life by his mother, and the scenes of her in the rocking chair with the candle, and moody, scary. I mean, there's the moment with the doctor. There's a scene in a doctor's office at night that is, I don't want to spoil it, but it's almost too scary. It's too frightening to it's got to turn your eyes to it. It's so frightening. There are moments in this film that are some of the most frightening moments I've ever seen in a film. Because again, it's just, we're so used to modern films of all genres full of explosions and sensory overload and all of this stuff. And so when you see something that has a quiet film, like much like something like The Innocents, like just this quiet and moody and moans and cries and Andy whispered in hushed tones. Oh my God. It really gets underneath. It gets underneath you, your skin. It nudges you. It's such a good movie. A number of years ago, in the early 2000s, Blue Underground released the special edition Blu-ray, which has all kinds of special features. And presumably they will also release it on Blu-ray in the US. But a German Blu-ray company called Subculture Entertainment, they've released, they have this Grindhouse collection. They've released Switchblade Sisters, and they've also released Deathdream, and their Blu-ray is pretty good. It's widescreen. It has really very few extras. It has a still gallery. It has a trailer. It has the ending of the film in full frame. It's been so many years, but I think there was some There was some discussion about the ending in the Blue Underground DVD, that it wasn't complete, or there was something going on with it. I think the Subculture Blu-ray has the complete ending, or something. Again, I don't quote me on that, but I think that's what's going on. Also on the Subculture DVD, it has what it's called an open matte version of the movie, which just looks like an analog transfer, like something that was for the VHS or some kind of analog release. It's just a full frame full of analog noise and stuff, and not the best way to watch Deathdream. The best way is really that incredible HD transfer that's on the Subculture Blu-ray. Also, it's being shown on TCM in the U.S., Turner Classic Movies, part of their TCM Underground series. For the past few years, it's kind of rotated on and off TCM in an HD transfer, I believe. I caught pieces of it on TCM about last year or the year before. It looks good. It looks good. And this is the perfect midnight movie. I remember years ago when I watched it on VHS, I watched it in the afternoon. And even then it was scary. Even then it freaked me the hell out. It was one of those movies I almost couldn't continue because it was that scary as a little kid. But this is the perfect midnight movie that you watch in a pitch black room, pitch black, with nothing but this film on a television or a projector in front of you, and just proceed to be scared out of your mind. It's that type of movie. It's a film with some social commentary and telling about what was happening in the early 70s in Vietnam. But it's also just a scary as hell movie, an ultimate drive-in horror movie that you can really get off on, and you don't really have to understand the historical context of it, and it really doesn't push the historical context. It's not a really period movie. I mean, this nuclear family of John Morley and Lynn Carlin and Anya Ormsby and Richard Bacchus as Andy, it works even today. Of course, it is, everything, the fashions, the cars, everything is period, in the early 70s, but otherwise it could work today. Oh my God, and I can't, before I leave you, oh my God, the ending with the car on fire. That's who the hell is crazy enough to pull off that stunt? I've never seen a fire gag with a moving car. Well, okay, the only other time I've seen a fire gag with a moving car was Maniac Cop 3. Maniac Cop 3, which was even cooler because the guy driving the car was on fire. This one is just like the car is trailing, but oh my God. Oh my, that's incredible. I mean, that is just amazing. I mean, how can you not watch that and just remember that and just go, ooh, incredible. But in any case, the movie is an incredible movie. All around, just a great, scary movie. Deathdream. AKA Dead of Night. Which is a better title, actually. Or The Night Andy Came Home, which is kind of a middle title. I think Dead of Night is the great title, is the good one. Deathdream's a little bit too hokey.